If you find yourself waking up feeling tight in your hamstrings, your hips, your shoulders, your back, and you're looking for a beginner-friendly mobility routine with a methodical approach, then this is the video for you. I began my yoga journey in my early 20s after a back injury, and it left me in bed for weeks, and it left me feeling tight and uncomfortable. I was lucky enough that my dad was a doctor and he helped me through this period, but he also opened up my interest in not only yoga anatomy, but the science behind stretching. In this video, I'm going to share with you the science behind stretching, the principles that you need to apply to your stretching routine, also an essential pack of stretches to give you the tools to improve your mobility from home. To improve the range of motion in our stretches, we need to look at our soft tissue. Now, I'm not talking about our ligaments, our tendons, I'm talking about our muscles and our fascia. I've spoken a lot about fascia before in one of my previous videos, so let's talk about muscles for a moment. Inside our muscles are these sensory organs known as muscle spindles, and they respond to two things: how far you come into the stretch and how fast you come into the stretch. If you come into the stretch too quickly and too far, this will send alarm bells to these little sensory organs, sending signals to our spinal column to lock up the muscles. Essentially, we're fighting our own bodies. We're setting off the nervous system and telling our body that this isn't safe. This is known as our stretch reflex. It's basically our body's way of trying to keep us safe. So now let's talk about some methodical principles we can apply to our stretching before we actually come into those mobility stretches. So by understanding the science of stretching, you will now also understand the importance of relaxing the nervous system, and the way we can do that is by using our breath. And we're going to use a special breath today where we breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth. Now we'll breathe in for the count of 4 and breathe out for the count of 8, and we will apply that breath with our stretches a little later on. The second principle we need to think about is how long we're holding these stretches for. And the ideal time, research has shown, is 2 minutes. So get yourself a stopwatch, a clock, whatever you need, and make sure you time your stretches. So before we begin, another important thing we need to talk about is how far we are pushing outside of our comfort zone. So we don't want to feel comfortable in these stretches because we won't make any progress. We want to work just outside of our comfort zone. So if you looked at a scale out of 10, we're working with roughly 7 out of 10. Okay, so let's come into the mobility exercises. First of all, you will need some yoga blocks, a pillow, and maybe a blanket as well. So make sure you grab those, put something comfy on, make sure you have enough room to stretch out, and I'll see you in a moment. So the first stretch we're going to come into is for our hamstrings. Now, if your hamstrings are screaming at you just from sitting down, you will need to grab a yoga block and just pop it underneath your hips to give yourself a little bit more space. Now you're going to work with bent knees for this, and take the feet hip distance apart. Take the toes pointing up, and I want you to take your belly all the way down towards your thighs. If it doesn't reach, you're going to bend the knees a little more. If it reaches with ease, you're going to straighten the legs until you're finding that 7 out of 10 intensity with your stretch. Take the hands around the back of the thighs, or perhaps even interlock your fingers here. Keep the neck completely relaxed. Press your timer, and this is where we introduce that breath work. So you're going to breathe in for the count of 4 and out for the count of 8. And continue in that way until your timer goes off. Our second pose is all about our shoulders, and we're going to come into a variation of puppy pose. So grabbing your yoga blocks once again, just placing those in front of you. Now traditionally our puppy pose is done with the hands all the way down, keeping the hips nice and high and dropping the forearms down. Now that is a strong stretch, normally far too strong for most, certainly if you're a beginner, and this is where your blocks come in handy. So you're going to place the forearms down onto the blocks like so. Shift the knees as far back as you can, but by keeping the hips and knees in line, and then you're going to just sink your head in between the arms, totally relaxing the neck. If you can straighten the arms here, do so, but if it feels too tight, you put a little bend in the elbows here. Once again, working with that 7 out of 10 intensity, set your timer off and working with that breath. For our third stretch, you're going to grab your blocks once again. Now you may not need two, maybe just one or maybe none at all, but start with two and see how it feels. Just taking your feet nice and snugly behind you there. You're going to be feeling the stretch now on the ankles as we come into plantar flexion and also our quads. If this feels comfortable, remove a block. If you're feeling that 7 out of 10 intensity, stay there, or perhaps you don't need a block at all and you want to sit comfortably, snugly in between the feet if you're using no block at all. Keeping your back straight, take a nice deep breath before you begin. Set your timer off and working with that breath once again. For our next stretch, one of my favourites, this one is for the thoracic spine. It gives your back a really good stretch. Now you're going to place a block down onto the mat using a thin pillow or a blanket just over the block, and that will just give us a little bit more comfort. Now the placement of that block is going to sit right where the thoracic spine is, so where the ribs are, coming all the way down and arching the back until the head reaches the floor. Now you can keep the knees slightly bent here. If you want a deeper stretch, you can straighten them. See how that feels. And then you're going to take the arms all the way overhead. Hopefully the fingers will touch the floor. If they don't, you're going to have to bend your elbows or perhaps rest them on a block behind you. Set your timer off and working with your breath work. For our final stretch, we're going to come into a lizard variation. So if you've got your blanket or pillow handy, you're just going to use that and place that behind the back knee. You'll thank me for that later. Starting off from a lunge position, you can use your blocks here just by stacking them on top of each other like so, and you're going to place the hands on them here. And then you're going to take the knee past the ankle as you sink the hips down. Now if the heel starts to peel up slightly, just shuffle that foot forwards and come into it again. And you're going to be feeling it in your hip flexors on that back leg. Just keep the chest slightly elevated. Set your timer and working with that deep breath work. Don't forget to do both sides as well, 2 minutes both sides, and there you go. That is the ultimate mobility routine. If you can work with that on a daily basis, with a methodical way, using your timer and your breath work, I promise you, you will start to make progress with your range of motion.